The surefire way to overcome self-doubt and pressure. Today's episode is sponsored by Billy Keels Advisory Services. If you want to learn more about how to make your 99 optional, just go to makeitoptional.com. Once again, that's makeitoptional.com.
Helping you build freedom without losing your edge. This is the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels.
The surefire way to overcome self-doubt and pressure. Well, this is for you if you have ever struggled to want to move forward, but you have continued to say to yourself, hey, I want to perform in my role. And at the same time, I want to move this new passion project forward, but you are just like caught in a place that it's just not happening as quickly or as efficiently as you want it to be. Just stick around, be very couple minutes, and I'm going to share a couple things that will help you to collapse time frames, and most importantly, how you can absolutely overcome self-doubt and pressure. Because if I did it, guess what? I definitely know you can do it. And so one of the things that happened is I've shared this in the beginning, was I didn't feel really comfortable sharing it, but I needed to go ahead and share it because before I bought and worked in corporate for 26 years, things went really, really well. And there was this last decade where I was, investing on the side and doing things and building business eventually, but it wasn't really super easy. It didn't just happen overnight. I went through self-doubt. I went through a lot of self-imposed pressure to perform, but, it took me 5 years to actually go from theory to practice. And I say that only to you because there's so many different things that could have happened during that 5 years. I was thinking about the alternative investing space for such a long time. I was reading books. I was watching videos. I was listening to podcasts just like this one. And I was continuously staying stuck in the world of theory. Why? Because it felt so much safer there. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, I can't just keep doing this. I want to go to online meetings. I started meeting people flying back to the United States and all these types of different things because I knew that I wanted to make a lot more money, but money that I could make under my control, not that was dependent on my employer, because I liked what I was doing there. At the same time, my eyes were opened in April of 2008. And I was like, whoa, hang on a second. There's a way that I can actually have more control over my income, which means I'm less dependent on my employer. I like my employer, but I can be less dependent on my employer. And so I wanted to test myself to see if I could become a lot less dependent on my employer. And so I went down this particular path. But as I went down this path, it didn't happen overnight, right? I went through a lot of the same questions, like if I started doing this, would I have enough time? Because what happens if what my colleagues are going to think, or, would I make the right choice? Now, if I make the wrong choice, am I going to lose the money? Is it going to impact me? Is it going to impact others? And a lot of it was really focused on what happens if I fail. Because that's what happens most of the time. We think about what happens when we can fail. And I was definitely in that boat. I was thinking about all these different things. But then I started realizing, as the people that I was meeting, like these people became my proof of concept, my POC. I talk about it here at nauseum. But I started realizing if there are other people that are in the enterprise software space and they also have rental properties, most of them were back in the States. I'm not talking about if you inherited one, and that's great. But I'm talking about that you went out and you put your own capital at risk, you put your own time and study and built your team, or didn't, or whatever the case may be. But you actively went out and said, I'm going to go and do this. I started seeing that was possible. And so when I had those proof of concepts, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn as much as I can, but I've got to get to a point where I'm actually doing. Like I said, it took me 5 years. But once I started to understand my process and I wanted to create a life that had a lot more options, and I talk about that in episode 547, you can take a listen to that if you want. I realized that I had money that I could lose, because that was one of the main barriers, because I come from a, scarcity mindset. That's the way that I grew up. If you have a little, keep it, and blah, blah, blah. But I knew the money that I could lose, right? I'm just sharing with you the process. So, and this is the surefire way that you can overcome your self-doubt and pressure. Break it down into bite-sized chunks. First of all, what money could I lose? I was clear with that. Then afterwards, I needed to find a property. Now, I did this wrong, but this was my process. And then I needed to get it under contract. I needed to close it and then ask myself a question. What happens if and when, most importantly, this goes well? Then what? Because see, that opens up a whole different realm of possibilities. It's like, okay, this is successful. So now what do I do? I've got to make it better. I've got to make it more efficient. I want to be able to serve more people. But the process was simple and clear. And that what that did by breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, it began to crush that self-doubt, that pressure, because I was in the doing, not in the thinking, the hypothesizing. I was actually doing it. And I didn't have time to think about doubting myself or overly pressured because I was doing. Money I could lose, get the property, get it under contract, close, and then what happens when this goes well? Then what? Now, I have to tell you, I had to learn how to be okay with the loss because I started thinking to myself, I can't stay stuck in this kind of theoretical ninja position forever. It was exhausting mentally because I got embarrassed of asking the question, like, what are you doing? Like, how does this look? What do you actually have assets in your portfolio? And when you keep saying no over and over and over, it doesn't feel very good. And I started to say to myself, well, you know what? If I lose it, at least I learned something. And from that moment in time, 8 months later, after I finally said, this is it, and I wrote down the goals and I said, I'm going to do this. It took me an additional 8 months to finally get the property, right? My first alternative investment. That's the thing that started me on my path. But along the way, and this is the lesson that I want to share with you, and if it's not you, somebody you know, that along the way, I overcame this whole issue of self-doubt and pressure, self-applied pressure. Why? Because I began to put together a very simple plan, not overly complicated. And then I trusted myself, I trusted my judgment, and I trusted the process that I put together. If nothing else, to progress and to realize that the real experience comes in the doing, not in the overthinking, not in the self-doubting. It's about what happens when things go well and what are the next level of ideas, options, issues that I have to resolve to make this even more powerful, right? And so this is the surefire way that I know for you to be able to overcome self-doubt and pressure, all right? And so if it's not you, but you know somebody who's suffering today through self-doubt, self-pressure, you see him constantly just doing these things, share today's episode and then go from sharing it to showing that you care. Actually get on the phone, meet him for coffee, meet him for whatever, and talk about today's episode. Help them. Because, you're the person who's taking enough time to care, to share and to care. And while you're doing that, guess what? Guess where I'll be? I'll be right here preparing for the next episode. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very, very much.